A feel-out meeting that, after 2 minutes, will reveal whether Putin is serious about peace. President Trump's unique set of summit expectations. It's another emergency. President Trump's 21st. This time, crime in D.C. and a federal takeover of local police. But for how long and to what effect? Did you pay more for electricity last year? For most of you, the answer is yes. We wonder, did power-gobbling data centers have something to do with it? Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. There is another 90-day trade truce with China. Calls for an independent investigation into and condemnation of an Israeli airstrike that killed 6 journalists in Gaza, 5 from Al Jazeera, 1 a Pulitzer Prize winner who worked for Reuters in 2024. And there is edginess in Ukraine and Europe about plans for a U.S. Russia summit Friday in Alaska. Ukraine's President Zelensky rejected President Trump's discussion today of land swaps. Europeans demanded an enforceable ceasefire and security guarantees for Ukraine before settling on any end to the war that Russia launched in 2022, the conduct of which has spawned repeated and credible allegations of war crimes. The summit, Trump said, would be a test of Putin's seriousness. Zelensky countered that what Russia appears most serious about is warfare, saying Russia is already moving troops in position for another offensive. But we begin with the nation's capital, governed under home rule by an elected mayor and city council, now under the federalized and militarized thumb of the Trump White House. The president declared a crime emergency today and took over the police department. Some 800 National Guard forces will join an array of federal agencies, the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, Park Police, Secret Service, among others, in beefed-up crime suppression efforts. This, despite statistics showing violent crime in the District of Columbia down from dangerous COVID and post-COVID highs that crested in 2023. It is unclear what these federal officers will do or how long their assignments, individually or collectively, will last. Current law limits the president's emergency police powers to 48 hours. Then, if Congress is notified, a 30-day extension can occur. For whatever duration, this aggressive move will expose residents of this city, myself included, to, as the Washington Post put it this afternoon, unpredictable encounters with a domestically deployed military force, a laboratory for a militarized approach to urban crime fighting. Here with me now, Scott McFarland. Scott, what do we know?
A laboratory for militarized law enforcement is the way it's been characterized by a number of people who are familiar with what's going on here. The president only has the power to do this in Washington, D.C. It's not a state, so he has control of the National Guard. He has unique capacity.
As its status as a federal district.
That's right. So he can call them up unilaterally. He's the only one who can call up the D.C. National Guard, and he has unique capacity to federalize the community police department, the local police, the 4,000-member Metropolitan Police Department. How this plays out over what's likely to be the 30-day window, according to multiple sources, could inform how he uses the National Guard elsewhere. But you saw what he could do elsewhere in Los Angeles.
Right.
He had the capacity to use them to protect federal buildings, courthouses, government offices. They couldn't be part of that law enforcement mission that he has ascribed to the D.C. National Guard, beginning as soon as their preparations and deployments begin, which could be later this week.
It's been my experience, Scott, and you're much more experienced in this realm than I am, that federal law enforcement officers have specialized training and specialized skill sets that are sometimes helpful to, knowledgeable of, but not exactly on a day-to-day basis consistent with or cooperative with beat cops in an urban environment. How is this going to work? Is there going to be friction or overlap or supervising, or what is it?
Oh, they're specialists in Washington, D.C. with working with different police departments. Washington, D.C. has 40-plus different police departments on total, from the library police to the U.S. Capitol Police to the Secret Service to the U.S. Park Police, which exists only in 3 cities in America. So working cohesively with different police departments, that's in the wheelhouse of anybody in law enforcement here. But when you have federal agents deployed to help patrol for street crime, some of them may have a law enforcement background that's perfect for that. Some came up from local police. They know exactly how to do that, and they certainly know the communities. They work there as federal agents, too. But we have Homeland Security experts saying, what are they missing back at their day job? FBI agents in Washington, D.C. have large portfolios that involve preventing terror attacks, child pornography, gun running. This gives them less breadth and time for those missions.
And there is a situation in the district that has alarmed residents dealing either with curfew breakers or carjacking. Is there any sense that there will be emphasis on those two areas which do raise serious and legitimate concerns from residents in this city about their safety?
Those are particularly pernicious types of crimes, youth crimes. Crimes involving those under the age of 18 require a whole portfolio of services, including human services, things that police can't get at alone, singularly.
Federal or local.
Hard to see how more law enforcement gets into the root of that problem.
But you said 30 days. That's the word we're getting from sources, that the White House is going to follow the law and limit this to 30 days.
If they want it more than 30 days, they need some form of congressional approval. That seems to be a tall task, if possible at all.
Scott McFarland, thank you very, very much. President Trump says Friday's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska is, quote, a feel-out meeting. The president says Russia and Ukraine will swap land if, in fact, a peace deal is reached. Ukrainian President Zelensky made clear his country is not prepared to give up territory. Trump said he was displeased with those comments. Ed O'Keefe joins me now from the White House. Ed, it was a long press conference there. You were in the front row. You asked the president about what his sense of this is, and he said he would know almost instantaneously whether or not Putin was serious.
That's right. In fact, let's just play part of our exchange with the president from the news conference. Take a look.
Having to do with route trade.
Meeting on Friday with Vladimir Putin.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
Because that's what I do. I make deals.
The deal maker says he will know almost immediately whether or not Vladimir Putin is serious about eventually cutting a deal with Volodymyr Zelensky and ending this war. He says, as you said, this is a feel-out meeting, trying to get a sense of how serious Putin is about reaching peace. He said he wants a ceasefire. He acknowledges that both sides may have to swap some territory they've gained during this 3-year-plus war to try to settle this. But, of course, the Ukrainians have said doing so is a non-starter. They want everything that they once held back. And you've seen multiple international leaders today, Major, suggest that anything about Ukraine's future should be settled by Ukraine alone in whatever realm. The president, though, is confident that this meeting eventually leads to a conversation that either he's involved in with those two other men on screen, or that they will meet alone, but that ultimately he will have helped broker some kind of at least temporary peace.
And, Ed, where does this leave us with the understanding of what the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, whom I know he trusts because he invests a lot of authority in him to be initial interlocutor on his behalf, didn't he feel out Putin last week? I mean, the president should have some idea of what's on the table.
Exactly. There's great risk involved here because, remember, several times now in the last few months, the president has signaled his frustration and sort of said out loud what the rest of official Washington and those that track Russia have said, which is he may do a good meeting with me on the phone, but then he turns around and bombs Ukraine again, which goes against everything we were just discussing. So there's a good chance that even now face-to-face, they may have a good meeting, and then Putin goes home and reneges on whatever it is they discuss. Big risk there. Big risk also for Ukraine, that the two leaders get in a room and start discussing the future of Ukraine without Ukrainian representation there. And it's not entirely clear what the risk is for Putin. He is showing up here in the United States while there are international arrest warrants out for him, warrants that the United States doesn't recognize. But regardless, he's back on the world stage alongside a U.S. president at a time when there are many in this country who, in the words of a Democratic senator I spoke to last week, said, Russia is essentially a third world country with a large gas pump, and it doesn't merit or deserve to have a face-to-face meeting with the American president, certainly not amid the current conditions. So we'll see. It is only Monday, Major, and there's a good chance that the contours of this could change, that it being held at all could change. But for now, the White House is planning for this meeting to happen in Alaska on Friday.
As it stands, an important caveat, as it stands, a photo op and no new sanctions, primary or secondary. Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Thank you very much. We are learning more about Friday's deadly shooting outside the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters in Atlanta. The gunman who killed a police officer had become fixated and outspoken against the COVID-19 vaccine. This, according to what his family told police and accounts from neighbors. The 30-year-old fired shots at 4 CDC buildings before being found dead at a pharmacy across the street. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder joins me now. She is also the editor-at-large for Public Health at KFF News. Dr. Gounder, I'm glad you're with me. Thanks so much. You had the opportunity to speak to a few CDC employees who were witnesses to this. I want to throw to that sound and then talk to you afterwards because what they said is so important.
Do you think that Secretary Kennedy's comments about mRNA vaccines recently and the cancellation of mRNA vaccine research had anything to do with this attack on Friday?
But I do think that it is a part of a pattern of behavior of using misinformation and conspiracies to demonize CDC scientists. When you throw unwarranted skepticism on an intervention that has saved millions of lives and frankly was projected to probably save millions more with novel vaccines that were being developed for other viruses and even therapeutics for cancer, I do think that that is just, again, part of a string of rhetoric that motivated the gunmen to target us.
So Secretary Kennedy came to the CDC in Atlanta today. What would you have liked to hear him say to the CDC staff?
I would like him to acknowledge how harmful his statements have been. I believe if he is not able to fully commit to stop attacking us and to stop attacking the interventions that we as scientists objectively evaluate, that this is going to continue. I want him to express contrition for his past behavior, and I want him to disavow his previous comments and commit to doing better moving forward and to support CDC staff in the work that we do.
And has President Trump said anything publicly about what happened on Friday?
No, and I am frankly scandalized by that. I can't imagine if, God forbid, any other federal building was under assault by an AR-15 rifle, that he would have said something by now. But since it was our federal building, he has remained silent.
And Dr. Gounder, if it's not plain to my audience, let me quickly explain. The identities and voices of those you spoke to, CDC employees, were altered because they fear for their safety at CDC headquarters and the general environs. Your impressions about what you heard and what this moment might represent?
I think this goes to show you that disinformation, just asking questions, has very real-world implications and can put people at risk. On the one hand, we have people who have not been getting vaccinated. For example, this big measles outbreak in West Texas that has spread to other states. So you have that kind of repercussion. And then you have these attacks against CDC workers who have been trying to keep the American public safe and healthy, who have been trying very hard over the course of the pandemic to roll out vaccines and do all of the other public health mitigation measures to protect the public's health, who are being villainized by this just asking questions and pushing out incorrect information about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines.
And Dr. Gounder, I'd like your impressions of the psychic toll this all takes, because I well remember, I know you do, in the early stages of COVID, we were so thankful for, reliant upon, and celebratory of those in the scientific community who might find us a way out. And now we've gotten to this place.
I think there's a real lack of respect for public service, which includes public health. These are people who have taken a pay cut in order to work in these jobs because they find the work so rewarding in other ways, the impact that they're having on people's lives. And you know what? They lived through the pandemic, too. They had the same impacts on their children, their kids' schooling, all of the other things in their social lives that were impacted. This is not something that was that they were shielded from. And to have worked as hard as they did, to have experienced all of that, and then now, over the course of the last several months, the way in which we've seen public servants, the CDC included, fired, terminated, riffed, and also the way in which budgets have been cut, followed by a shooting on campus, you can only imagine the kind of toll this has taken on the morale of the staff.
Dr. Celine Gounder, my thanks to you as always. Here's a look at what's still to come on tonight's Takeout.
We will drill, baby, drill.
That familiar energy mantra from President Trump not translating in the oil patch or fracking zones. Rig counts and employment are down. We take a look. The price of electricity rose in 45 states last year by double digits in more than a dozen of them. Are data centers that fuel AI driving this price surge? Evidence says yes. And he went from marketing to mail delivery, a COVID layoff that changed his life. We meet the accidental mailman and learn what he discovered. Takeout returns in 90 seconds.
Today, I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
That was President Trump's pledge just minutes into his second term. But since then, the numbers about drilling and drilling rigs, well, they tell a very different story. According to energy technology company Baker Hughes, on January 20th, there were 580 active oil and gas drilling rigs here in the United States. Today, that number stands at 539. Robert Rapier joins me now. He's the editor-in-chief of Shale Magazine, which covers the energy industry. He also has 25 years of international engineering experience. Robert, explain what's happened, the disconnect in the drill, baby, drill mantra.
So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that oil companies respond to oil prices. The president can wish all he wants that they will go out and drill, but ultimately they're looking at oil prices, they're looking at their expectations for where oil prices are going to be, and that determines whether they drill. He's passed some policies that they like, but he's passed policies they don't like. They certainly don't like these tariffs on steel and tariffs on equipment. And so, but at the end of the day, they're looking out on the horizon and they have to answer to their shareholders, not the president. And that determines whether they drill. And oil prices have gone down over the last few months. And that, more than anything, is dictating whether they're going to drill.
I looked at my watch in the break between segments, Robert, and West Texas Intermediate closed today at $64. Where does that put most oil exploration discussions?
They're going to be very conservative at these kinds of prices. And oil prices have fallen for several reasons, and President Trump is responsible for some of those reasons. But there are a lot of global reasons why oil prices have declined. President Trump did get Saudi Arabia. He encouraged them to produce more. But, China's imports are slowing down. There's a lot of reasons oil prices have gone down. And, that affects the oil industry in the U.S. I tell people that, low oil prices in the U.S. at one time were a good thing. 20 years ago, we were importing 12.5 million barrels a day of oil. And now we're exporting oil and finished products. So falling oil prices are actually overall bad for the trade deficit. They worsen our trade deficit now, and they're bad for the oil industry. And, I know people like to see low gas prices at the pump. I like to see them myself, but we've got to understand we're not in the same regime that we were in 20 years ago when we were major importers of crude oil.
And Robert, I have read in your publication and others that even if there were more rigs, there would be less employment than historically because rigs are more efficient now. AI plays into that. Other efficiencies on site means that even when there is extraction going on for natural gas or petroleum, you can do it with fewer employees.
That's correct. I mean, if you look at what happened with natural gas rigs declined and natural gas production just continued to rise. So you are getting more oil per rig, so it doesn't take as much. One thing to point out is oil production has still risen. We will likely set, we've set oil production records, and people don't realize this. We produced more oil and gas than any other country in the world in 2023, and then we surpassed that in 2024. And we will probably surpass that again this year. We're running about 2% higher year to date. But over the past couple of months, production has started to decline. So I don't think it's going to decline enough that will prevent us from setting a record this year. But I think next year we will see lower production for the first time in 3 years. But, it's not like we weren't drilling before. We were producing record amounts of oil and gas, the last 2 years of the Biden administration.
Robert Rapier, thank you for that perspective and that expertise. I appreciate it very, very much. President Trump's former Surgeon General criticizes RFK Jr. over changes to federal vaccine research. More on Dr. Jerome Adams's warnings about the risks ahead. Welcome back to the Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with me. Here is a look at what else we, and now you, are watching this evening. A federal judge today denied the Trump Justice Department request to unseal grand jury transcripts in the case of Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge said the basis for the DOJ request, that unsealing records could shed new light on Maxwell or Epstein's crimes, is, quote, demonstrably false. The judge also said a release of these transcripts risked, quote, unraveling the foundations of secrecy upon which the grand jury is premised. The Justice Department has said the transcripts in question only contain testimony from law enforcement. AI chip makers NVIDIA and AMD have come to an unusual export agreement with President Trump. Both will pay the U.S. government 15% of revenue generated by sales of select AI chips in China. The administration had approved sales previously, but held back vital export licenses. Both companies crave access to the Chinese market. Payment to the U.S. government for export licenses has no known precedent. If it happens, President Trump's proposed July 4th UFC fight on the White House grounds will be on Paramount+. The Paramount company of CBS News has sealed a 7-year, $7.7 billion deal to stream UFC fights. Paramount will possess exclusive distribution rights to UFC's full slate of 13 marquee events and 30 fight nights on Paramount+. The deal begins next year. Select events will be simulcast on CBS. This moves the UFC away from its pay-per-view model. Here with me now for our political reporter panel, staff writer for The Atlantic, Tolu Olorunipa, and Politico's White House reporter, Sophia Kai. So, Tolu, you used to cover the White House with me, and you did it for Bloomberg. I just want to ask you about this whole thing with the chip makers and this 15% payment to the U.S. government for export licenses. I know there are national security implications. I know the president loves to exercise transactional authority, but this seems to me to be like jaw-dropping.
It's unprecedented. We've never seen this kind of deal before. It is in line with the way that President Trump likes to operate. He wants to make sure that America, the government, he himself is getting credit or is getting some kind of benefit from any of the foreign trade deals or foreign transactions that are happening, especially when it comes to China being an adversary, being someone that we're competing with in this AI race. He is very clearly wanting to make sure that the U.S. gets something out of it. He thinks this is a deal that will benefit the U.S. government. He's trying to bring in tariff revenue, and now he's bringing in money directly from these companies for their foreign exports.
But, Sophie, it creates a dynamic where other companies have to start asking themselves, what do they have to do to get some sort of favored treatment? Tim Cook with Apple was exempted from various tariffs for special underlying products in the iPhone. We got this. This creates a mad dash, it seems.
And I think that's a part of the point. I mean, you saw Tim Cook get up there last week and hand Trump this sort of uniquely, one-of-a-kind crafted glass that had been made in a factory in Kentucky. And he's announced that, and this is a big deal, that from now on, every piece of glass that you use in an iPhone or an Apple Watch will be made in the U.S. I think, some of these actions, to Trump's credit, have pushed U.S. companies to make that step, to make things here. And so, yeah, I think you'll probably see some companies say, and right, this is happening at GSA, under the level of the president, but at GSA, there's someone named Josh Greinbaum, who's the head of federal acquisitions, who's, getting all of these companies to come to the table to say, what have you got for the U.S. government? They got AWS to give the U.S. a $1 billion coupon. That's also unprecedented.
We use that word a lot, and we wish we didn't have to, but we have to use it because these things don't have a precedent. We also have something that is very new in this city. the District of Columbia. The president today declaring emergency, as I mentioned in the open of the show, the 21st of his 2 terms in office. 21 emergencies under President Trump. This one related to crime. Scott McFarland was just on set with me saying 30 days is how long it is likely to last, but it's still a very big deal.
It is a big deal, and if President Trump has his way, this will be something that lasts far beyond the 30 days, not just the federalizing of the D.C. police, but he wants to remake the entire city. He wants to, get rid of the homeless encampments. He wants to create this big ballroom on the White House. He wants to even talk about filling potholes and covering them up with fresh asphalt. So this is a clear effort that he wants to do more than just federalize the police department and put the National Guard on the streets. He wants to do that, and maybe that will last for 30 days, but he has this broader vision of recreating Washington, D.C., even sort of being a kind of mayor. Remember that he appointed himself as the leader of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. So he has an interest in the city, and he wants to really lead the city in a way that we've never seen a president before, since there is already a mayor and a D.C. City Council that are already doing these things.
Empowered by the voters to act on their behalf.
Exactly. He wants to usurp that power and have it for himself.
And Sophia, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about the New York mayor's race. We haven't talked about it on the Takeout for a while, but it's still churning in interesting directions.
Yes, and Mamdani today is sort of taking...
Zohran Mamdani, yes.
Zohran Mamdani, he's front runner in the mayoral race in New York. He has taken a page out of Trump's playbook, and he said, all right, Trump's going to do this in D.C., and he's just announced a 5-borough tour, an anti-Trump tour, and in many ways, he's now making it about himself and his campaign. I mean, this is someone who's quick on his feet, and, just like someone like Jasmine Crockett, he sort of put himself on the national stage and tried to get under Trump's skin. That's what's going on, the latest in the New York race.
And that is a tactic designed to intensify hostility to Trump on his behalf, to sort of take Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo out of the conversation.
Right. I mean, I think you even see the Republican candidate in that race.
Curtis Leawood.
He say that, Trump stay out of it. We know that there were some conversations about whether Trump would endorse. And, I think the Republican Party in New York knows that the more that it's, a Trump versus Mamdani, the better it could be for Democrats.
And to allude to your earlier point, Trump doesn't stay out of much at all.
He wants to be involved in everything, from the Kennedy Center to the New York mayor's race to even potentially taking over other cities like Chicago and Baltimore.
With whispers in New York City that he might try to find a way to endorse Andrew Cuomo and push Eric Adams out, or vice versa. Who knows? It vacillates by the hour and by the New York Post headline otherwise. Well, look at the New York Post, right? Yeah. Tolu Oloruniyi. Sophia Kai, thanks so very much. Where am I? Am I 2 guy? Okay, keep pointing to 2. I'll keep reading from 2. Has your electricity bill risen lately? Rates were up 6.5% nationally last year. Only 5 states saw electricity costs decline. Are data centers a culprit? I'll leave that question hanging and answer it next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. As big tech and the energy-intensive data centers needed to power it grow in the U.S., so are America's electricity bills. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the average retail residential price for 1 kilowatt hour of electricity in the U.S. has increased by about 6.5% over the past year. And evidence is mounting that data centers are part of this conversation, possibly irritatingly so. Ari Pesco joins me now. He is the director of the Electricity Law Initiative at Harvard Law School. Didn't even know there was such a thing. Ari, it's great to have you with us. My incredible staff has put together a lot of data on this, and I want to go through it. So, as of March, there were 5,000 data centers in our country. Explain to my audience how much energy they consume and how they differ from a residential consumer or even a regular factory or business.
Sure. So data centers have been part of the backbone of our internet for decades, and they use a few percent of electricity in the United States. What's changed, though, really since the introduction of ChatGPT a few years ago is the size of these facilities. Today, the new data centers that are being developed use as much electricity as a large city. And we're seeing companies trying to develop these facilities, these industrial scale computing facilities, across the country.
This is another great question my team put together. According to market watchdog Monitoring Analytics, data center demand drove 70% of last year's increased electricity cost, or about $9.3 billion. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, so what that's talking about is that the country is divided into various regions. There's one region that stretches from New Jersey to Chicago down to North Carolina. They run an annual auction to make sure they have enough power plants in the region to keep the lights on. The value of that auction spiked. And this consultancy that you're referring to is in charge of monitoring the market, calculated that basically data centers were responsible for 70% of that cost increase. And that's shared across the region to all consumers and businesses in the area.
Ari, what are the trajectories in the next 3 or 4 years in this space?
So it's possible this problem could get worse, but we do have regulators in every state that are responsible for the prices charged by electric utilities. There's a lot they can do to improve the situation. 3 out of 4 Americans get service from a for-profit utility that makes money not by selling energy, but by building infrastructure like power lines and power plants. These new data centers are so large that utilities have a great excuse to build a lot of infrastructure and spread those costs to everyone, even though they're being built just for these data centers. But there's a lot that regulators can do to try to isolate these data centers and the cost that they're causing on the system to make sure that the rest of America is not paying for these facilities.
Speaking of who's paying for it, would not a customer irked by higher electricity prices reasonably ask the question, wait a minute, we're talking about corporations that are larger than most countries on this planet. Why can't they pay for the cost entirely since they are the beneficiaries of them in the first place?
That's absolutely the right question to ask. And I think we're starting to see states wise up to this challenge. There have been a number of laws passed, politically diverse as places like Maryland and Utah, that are trying to tackle this problem. One way to do it is by, as I said, trying to isolate these costs, make sure the data centers are paying for them. The other opportunity here is really to break the monopolies that utilities have and allow data centers to actually go out and buy power from someone who's not your local utility and therefore wouldn't have the ability to basically spread that cost across the region. So we are seeing a few states look into that opportunity as well to basically say these monopolies make sense for everyday Americans to make sure that we all get electricity service. But when it comes to the world's wealthiest corporations, they can go out and procure their own power. They're very sophisticated companies. They know how to do that, and let them have that opportunity, and that will protect consumers from any costs that might result.
Harvard's Ari Pesco, I appreciate the time, sir, and your expertise. Thanks so much. Artificial intelligence is also posing a threat when it comes to U.S. elections. Next, I'll speak with an expert about why he says we are in, or about to enter, the era of AI propaganda. Swell. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Online misinformation in the form of lies and abusive speech, well, that's long posed significant problems and threats to our democratic conversations and the institutions built around them. But according to this new opinion piece in the New York Times, false narratives generated by artificial intelligence are a far greater danger to global politics. The article's co-author, Brett Benson, joins me now. He is an associate professor of political science at Vanderbilt University and a faculty affiliate at its Institute of National Security. Brett, I'm glad you joined me. Thanks so much. Your piece in the New York Times focuses on what the Institute of National Security uncovered about a Chinese company called, if I get this correct, Golaxy. What is it and what does it do?
That's right. So Golaxy is a Chinese company that specializes in AI-driven data analytics and also state-aligned influence operations. There are really 3 parts to what it does. The first part is that it collects massive amounts of open source online user data. So just to give an idea, Golaxy on a daily basis, it scrapes millions of data points from places like Facebook, Twitter, Weibo, WeChat, and other online platforms. And so it holds data on tens of thousands of individuals and organizations in Hong Kong, Taiwan, now the United States, as well as China. The second part to what it does is that it builds political and behavioral profiles of users and organizations. It builds these based upon how users interact in social media platforms. And then the third thing that it does is that it produces and disseminates politically aligned content to steer public opinion through what we call personas. These are fake but highly realistic AI-generated bots. They're basically made up online profiles that look and are intended to act like a real person. And it does this for the purpose of steering political content.
And has this had an effect on the dialogue or the outcomes of political conversations in Hong Kong and or Taiwan?
So what the documents reveal that we analyzed is that Golaxy claims to have had operations in Hong Kong during the national security law uproar, as well as the 2024 Taiwan elections. An ongoing research question for us is really just how effective these types of operations are in the real world, how effective they are at influencing individuals, how effective they are at moving public opinion. That's an open question that we're studying.
Is there an America angle to this? Members of Congress, things like that, who should be alerted and maybe thinking about legislation or other ways to block it?
Oh, I think that there is an American angle. I think it's threefold, to be frank. I think on one level, users should be really vigilant. So public awareness is a key part of this. They should be vigilant about how they engage in their online activity and how they might be influenced by their online activity. TikTok is a really useful analogy here. It's a platform that a lot of users are familiar with. It tracks what people watch, like, share, what they rewatch, and then it uses that data to show more content. And over time, its algorithm fine-tunes to individuals' preferences. Golaxy does a similar thing, except that while TikTok is pushing lifestyle and entertainment content, what Golaxy is doing is targeting with politically aligned AI operations. And while TikTok is influencers are human, on this platform, the AI-generated bots and personas are really the influencers. So on one level, what is really needed is a lot of increased vigilance by users. What government can do and what private organizations can do in partnering with each other, this is an area that we tend to dive deeper into at the Institute. But then on a third level,
well, I got about 20 seconds, Brett, so I need you to be quick on this.
Yeah, there's a huge role for universities to play, for researchers, because understanding how effective this is and what its role is in society and how to generate detection mechanisms, that's something that we can do.
Vanderbilt University's Brett Benson. I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you. Faced with a cancer diagnosis, an out-of-work consultant in search of health insurance finds himself a rural letter carrier. Author Steve Starring Grant on how working for the post office, in part, saved his life. That's next. Welcome back. It sounds like a better than average Hollywood script. A consultant laid off during the pandemic finds purpose as a mailman in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Stephen Starring Grant shares his story in his new book, Mailman, My Wild Ride Delivering the Mail in Appalachia and Finally Finding Home. Here is some of our conversation. Let's start at the beginning. You're not your prototypical mailman in America, are you?
No, sir, I am not. I was laid off at the beginning of the pandemic after 25 years in advertising and marketing in different functions.
Blindsided by that, I'm
very much blindsided by it. You know, traditionally in any kind of a downturn in the economy, marketing and advertising always takes the first hit. They're the canary in the coal mine, right? And this was sort of like a mine collapse. Mm-hmm. So we were a small independent agency, and everybody just closed shop immediately. All our clients were just like, "Hey, it's been real. Thank you." In fact, I talk about it in the book. I was flying from home to New York by way of Charlotte, the airport in Charlotte, and I got called in the Charlotte airport by my boss. He said, like, "Don't bother coming to New York. Clients canceled the meeting. Oh, by the way, we're closing down the agency."
And you're done.
And you're done. So I literally walked back into the Admirals Club and was like, "I'm going to need a ticket home."
Right.
And so as I started looking for a job, the only outfit in town that was hiring was the United States Postal Service.
And there was an allure there driven principally, as I understand it, by the accessing of healthcare.
Yes. So part of the thing I needed healthcare. I had a prostate cancer diagnosis. I still do. I'm under excellent care through Duke University. But as I started looking around, again, jobs were few and far between, but I noticed that through the Postal Service, good union job, there was healthcare available on day one, even as a probationary employee. And so I took a psychological test online, then went into Roanoke, did 2 weeks at the Postal Academy, and after that I was on the road.
Now help my audience understand, because you would come to this with a series of expectations that most people who've never been a part of the United States Postal Service would have. So help my audience understand what your expectations were and what reality was.
Yeah, I don't know, somehow in my mind it was sort of a jump cut to I'm whistling down a country lane with letters and there's like a pie cooling on a windowsill or something like that. And you know, my brother John told me, he's just like, well, man, this must be great. You just get in the truck and put in a podcast. And it's like, that's true.
But that's a fraction of it.
That's a fraction of it. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're at home and you're a citizen, a customer, you see the mailman coming up the walk, or you see him pull up to the end of your driveway. That's all you see. You see this.
Right.
And he sticks it in the mailbox. And the reality is you have to sort everything into route order in the morning. So there's the first class mail, what we call DPS, which is delivery point system. Then there's the little packages, those are called spurs. Then there's the parcels. Then there's some things we call raw mail, which is stuff that didn't quite get sorted at the processing center. So you get to sort it. And there's a thing that looks like a bookshelf at your workstation. So for Route 8, when I delivered Route 10, when I delivered Route 10, every address on Route 10 has a little slot, little pigeonhole, and you put everything in that, and then you take it all down in order, and you very carefully move it into your vehicle, and then as you go.
For a chef, this is like food prep.
Yes, you are your own sous chef.
Right.
Right. And Lord help you if you make a mistake there, because then you're going to have to fix it out on the road.
Right.
And so, you know, you learn really to invest the time in that in the morning, because it's really going to kind of make or break your day. And part of the problem is, you know, when you come in as the sub and you meet the regular that holds your route, they don't even think about it. They're talking to you. They're talking to each other over the tops of the cases, and they're not even hardly looking at it because it's all in their head.
Right. Geolocate this for me. Where did you do this work?
Sure. I did this in Blacksburg, Virginia, home of Virginia Tech, the Cambridge of the Appalachians.
Right, exactly.
And Blacksburg is where I grew up. My father was a professor of engineering there, though we are Appalachian by birth. Dad's originally from Weston, West Virginia, so we're just over the state line in southwestern Virginia. But you've got the Gownies and the Townies, and so you've got some of Nobel Prize winning scientists at an R1 research school,
right? And
just outside the town limit is Appalachia. Are people living in remote homes out in the countryside, much as their grandparents and great-grandparents.
See my entire conversation with Stephen starring Grant, including a part where it gets into a horror movie hornet's nest sort of thing, on CBSNews.com, the Takeout YouTube page, and on our podcast platforms. That is it for the Takeout today. Stick around. The Daily Report starts right now.